The first time I met Nolan's mother, she tried to poison me. That sentence alone should tell you the kind of storm I walked into the day we decided to visit. It was supposed to be a simple introduction. Me, Nolan, our newborn daughter Juno, and the in-laws. But with Nolan's vague warnings about his mother's manipulative streak, I came prepared. We're so delighted to finally meet you, Alara. And little Juno, she's just precious, Corinne, Nolan's mother, cooed as we entered their lavish living room. Her smile was warm, but her eyes didn't quite match the sentiment. Thank you, Corinne. We've been looking forward to this visit, I replied, balancing Juno on my hip. Nolan had that tight smile he reserved for uncomfortable situations, his hand finding mine and squeezing it gently. Let me get you some of our special herbal tea, Alara. It's a family recipe, very rejuvenating, Corinne offered, disappearing into the kitchen before I could politely decline. Nolan leaned in, whispering, Remember what I said about Mom, just be careful. I nodded, recalling our conversations about his mother's past behavior. The warnings were vague, but enough to put me on edge. When Corinne returned, handing me a steaming cup, her smile was a little too eager. Here you go, dear. Drink up. Politeness dictated I at least pretend to sip, but caution won over. I had slipped a test strip into my purse for such an occasion, a precaution that now seemed eerily prescient. As Corinne and Nolan chatted, I dipped the strip into the tea when no one was looking. The change in color was immediate and damning. Nolan, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Your mother just tried to poison me. The room fell silent, the words hanging in the air like a guillotine's blade. Nolan's face went from confusion to horror as he turned to Corinne. Mom, what is this? Alara, are you sure? I'm certain, I said, showing him the test strip. Corinne's facade crumbled, replaced by a cold fury I hadn't seen before. How dare you accuse me of such a thing in my own home? Corinne's voice was sharp, her veneer of warmth gone. Nolan stood, positioning himself protectively in front of me and Juno. Mom, explain, now. I don't have to explain myself to anyone. Corinne snapped, her demeanor that of someone cornered. You bring this girl into my home, and she accuses me of poisoning her? Nolan, we should leave, I said quietly, feeling Juno stir in my arms. Not without an explanation, Nolan insisted, though his voice betrayed his understanding that we were unlikely to get one. The confrontation escalated, Corinne vehemently denying any wrongdoing, while simultaneously revealing her disdain for me. It was clear this was more than a mere misunderstanding. It was a declaration of war. As we left, Nolan's silence was heavy with unspoken apologies and the weight of a reality he had hoped to avoid. We had walked into a trap, laid with a smile and a cup of tea. And as the door closed behind us, I knew this was just the beginning. The battle lines were drawn, not over a mere disagreement, but over the safety and well-being of our family. I'm sorry, Alara. I should have listened to my own warnings more closely, Nolan finally said as we drove away, the distance from Corinne's house growing with each passing mile. It's not your fault, Nolan. We knew she might be difficult, but we couldn't have anticipated this, I reassured him, though my mind raced with plans and contingencies. This wasn't just about surviving Corinne's manipulations. It was about protecting our daughter from the toxicity that lurked behind polite smiles and poisoned welcomes. And as the road stretched out before us, I knew one thing for certain. We were in this together, come what may. After the poisoned tea incident, the ride back home was a quiet storm. Juno, oblivious to the tension, cooed softly in her seat, a stark contrast to the turmoil between Nolan and me. As soon as we were home, Nolan went straight to the phone. I watched, holding Juno close, as he dialed his sister, Leah, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Leah, it's Nolan. We need to talk about Mom, he began, his voice betraying a mix of anger and desperation. The conversation was long and fraught with pauses filled with years of unsaid grievances. I could only catch Nolan's side, but it was enough to paint a picture of disbelief and realization. He hung up, looking drained but determined. Leah had her suspicions. She stopped drinking anything at Mom's years ago. Never thought. His voice trailed off, the weight of his family's dysfunction settling in. We need to expose her, Nolan. For Juno's sake, we can't let her get away with this, I said, the urgency of our situation pressing down on me. Nolan nodded, a silent agreement to a path neither of us ever anticipated we'd take. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Nolan reached out to other family members, while I took to the internet, digging into forums and social media groups for anyone who might have had similar experiences with Corinne. The stories we found were chilling. Corinne had a history of manipulating situations to her advantage, often at the expense of others' well-being. There were tales of sabotaged relationships, career opportunities destroyed, and even hints at darker deeds. Each story added another piece to the puzzle of Corinne's true nature. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by notes and laptop screens, Nolan's Aunt Diane called. She had been estranged from the family for years, a fallout from her own confrontation with Corinne. "I heard what happened, Nolan. I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner." Diane's voice was heavy with regret. "It's not your fault, Aunt Diane. We're just trying to figure out what to do next," Nolan replied, his tone weary. "I might have something that can help. After my falling out with Corinne, I started keeping records of her, let's call them discrepancies. Dates, incidents, anything that seemed off. I thought it might be useful one day," Diane explained, her voice gaining strength. "Could we see them?" I asked, my interest piqued. "Of course. I'll send everything I have. It's time someone put an end to her reign," Diane said, the determination in her voice clear. The package arrived 2 days later, a thick envelope filled with notes, emails, and photographs. Diane's meticulous records provided a timeline of Corinne's manipulations, a damning collection of evidence that painted a horrifying picture of the woman who had tried to harm me. Nolan and I pored over the documents, realizing the scale of Corinne's deceit was far beyond what we had imagined. It wasn't just about us or Juno, it was about every person Corinne had ever wronged. "We need to go public with this," Nolan said, conviction in his voice. "We have to show everyone who she really is." I nodded in agreement. "And we'll need to be careful. She won't go down without a fight." The decision was made. With Diane's evidence and the stories we had gathered, we began to craft our strategy. Our aim was clear: to expose Corinne's manipulations and protect others from her toxic influence. The battle lines were drawn not just for our family's safety, but for the community's as well. Corinne had played her game for far too long, and it was time to end it. For Juno, for ourselves, and for every silent victim of Corinne's cruelty, the fight was just beginning. The days following our decision to expose Corinne were filled with clandestine meetings and whispered phone calls. Nolan and I had become detectives in our own right, piecing together the mosaic of Corinne's manipulations. But it wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore, it was about building alliances. One evening, Nolan received a call from his cousin Marcus, who had been on the fringes of the family drama for years. "I heard about what you're doing," Marcus said, his voice tinged with a mix of caution and intrigue, "and I want in." "Why now?" Nolan asked, skepticism clear in his tone. "Because I'm tired of watching from the sidelines. Aunt Corinne has done enough damage. It's time to stop her," Marcus replied, his resolve evident even through the phone. Marcus's involvement opened the floodgates. One by one, family members and old acquaintances began to reach out, each with their own story of how Corinne had wronged them. It was as if Nolan and I had lit a beacon, calling all those who had been harmed to come forward. Among them was a woman named Clara, who had been Corinne's assistant for years before a sudden and unexplained dismissal. "I saw things," Clara confessed when we met in a quiet cafe, her eyes darting around as if Corinne might appear at any moment. Documents, emails, things that weren't right. I kept copies of everything, thinking it might come in handy someday. Clara's files were a treasure trove of information, detailing financial irregularities and covert manipulations that went beyond personal vendettas into the realm of the criminal. It was the kind of evidence that could not only discredit Corinne, but potentially lead to legal action against her. As the network of allies grew, so did our confidence. But it wasn't just about bringing Corinne down anymore. It was about healing the wounds she had inflicted. Each person who came forward shared not just their grievances, but their hopes for resolution and peace. The plan to expose Corinne began to take shape. We decided on a community meeting, but a forum where those affected could speak openly about their experiences. The event would be advertised as a discussion on community wellness, a guise that would prevent Corinne from suspecting our true intentions until it was too late. The night before the meeting, Nolan and I sat with Juno between us, going over our final preparations. "Do you think we're ready?" I asked, seeking reassurance in Nolan's steady gaze. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he replied, squeezing my hand. "We're doing this for the right reasons. For Juno, for the family, for everyone Corinne has ever hurt. No matter what happens, we're doing the right thing." The day of the meeting, the community center was buzzing with an undercurrent of tension and anticipation. As people began to fill the room, I recognized faces from our conversations, each one carrying a story of resilience and hope. When Corinne arrived, escorted by a few loyalists unaware of the evening's true purpose, the room fell into an uneasy silence. She took a seat at the front, her confidence unshaken, a smirk playing at the corner of her mouth as if she already knew she would emerge victorious. The meeting began with general discussions on community issues, but it wasn't long before the conversation turned, as planned, to the topic of manipulation and deceit within our own ranks. One by one, individuals stood up to share their stories, their voices steady but charged with emotion. With each testimony, Corinne's facade began to crack, her confident demeanor giving way to a growing realization of her impending downfall. As I stood to share our story, Nolan by my side, I looked out at the sea of faces before us. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a declaration of our collective strength against the tyranny of one. Tonight, we stand together not just to expose the deceit and manipulation that has plagued our community, I began, my voice echoing through the room, but to reclaim our dignity, our unity, and our hope for a better future. This is our moment of truth. The room erupted into applause, a sound that marked not the end, but the beginning of our journey toward healing and justice. The aftermath of the community meeting was a whirlwind of emotions and actions. Our collective voice had been heard, but the real battle, we knew, was just beginning. Corinne, cornered and furious, left the meeting with a stormy expression, promising retribution with her eyes. That night, Nolan and I sat in our living room, Juno asleep in her crib, preparing for the next phase of our plan. "We need to be careful," Nolan said, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through a barrage of messages on his phone. "She's going to come after us with everything she's got." I nodded, feeling the weight of our decision. "We need to be smarter. We've got the community behind us now. It's time to use that momentum." The following days were a test of our resolve. Corinne, true to form, began a smear campaign, attempting to discredit those who had spoken out against her. But the tide had turned. For every lie she spread, there was a counterwave of support for us and our allies. It was during this time that we learned of a town hall meeting scheduled to discuss the recent disturbances in the community. Corinne, despite the growing opposition, had managed to position herself as a mediator, seeking to heal the community she had so adeptly divided. "We can't let her control the narrative," I told Nolan. "This town hall is our chance to expose her publicly, with undeniable evidence." Nolan agreed, and we began gathering all the documentation, testimonies, and evidence we had accumulated. Marcus and Clara, among others, worked tirelessly with us, compiling a dossier that painted a comprehensive picture of Corinne's manipulations. The night before the town hall, our living room was a command center of activity. Maps of the community center were laid out, positions assigned, and every detail of our presentation rehearsed. Our plan was to confront Corinne with the evidence, demanding accountability in front of the entire community. "Are we ready for this?" Marcus asked, looking around the room at each of us. "We have to be," Nolan replied, his voice steady. "For everyone she's hurt, for our family, we have to see this through." The day of the town hall arrived with a palpable tension in the air. The community center was packed, a testament to the gravity of the situation. Corinne was already there, surrounded by a dwindling number of supporters, her confidence seemingly unshaken. As the meeting began, Corinne took the stage, her voice oozing faux concern for the community's unity and healing. But her speech was cut short when Nolan stood up, the dossier in his hands. "Enough, Corinne," he said, his voice echoing in the packed room. "It's time for the truth." The room fell silent as Nolan and I approached the stage, the evidence folder in hand. Corinne's face went pale, her mask of concern slipping as she realized what was about to happen. One by one, we presented the evidence, financial records, emails, testimonies from those she had wronged. With each piece of evidence, Corinne's facade crumbled, her attempts to interject and deny growing weaker. The community's response was immediate and supportive. As we laid bare Corinne's manipulations, there were gasps, murmurs of disbelief, and then, as we concluded, a standing ovation. It wasn't just a victory for us, but for the entire community, a collective sigh of relief and a step toward healing. Corinne, defeated and exposed, left the stage amidst a chorus of boos and shouts. The battle was won, but we knew the war was far from over. Still, standing there among our allies, feeling the support of the community around us, we knew we had turned a crucial corner. Together we had faced down a tyrant and emerged stronger, united by our shared struggle for justice and integrity. The days following the town hall were a mix of relief and vigilance. Corinne had been publicly exposed, her manipulations laid bare for all to see. Yet we knew the battle was far from over. Corinne was wounded, but not defeated, and her capacity for revenge was a well we knew ran deep. The community's support was overwhelming. People we barely knew came forward with offers of help and words of encouragement. It was as if Corinne's exposure had not just vindicated those she had wronged, but it also liberated a community from her grip of fear. Yet in the midst of this newfound unity, the question of what Corinne would do next lingered like a shadow. It wasn't long before we had our answer. 2 weeks after the town hall, Nolan received a legal notice. Corinne was suing us for defamation, a move as bold as it was desperate. The lawsuit was baseless, a fact clear to anyone who had witnessed her public downfall. But it was her message to us. She was not going down without a fight. "We'll fight this," Nolan said, his jaw set as he read over the notice again. "We have the truth on our side. And we have the community," I added, feeling a surge of determination. This lawsuit was not just an attack on us, but on everyone who had stood up to Corinne. The legal battle that ensued was grueling. Corinne's tactics were as underhanded in the courtroom as they had been in her personal dealings. But for every move she made, we countered with the solid foundation of truth and evidence we had built. During this time, our allies proved invaluable. Testimonies from those Corinne had wronged painted a damning picture of her character and actions. Clara's documentation became a cornerstone of our defense, her meticulous records irrefutable in the face of Corinne's lies. The turning point came when Marcus took the stand. He recounted not just his personal experiences with Corinne, but also revealed a series of emails that exposed her attempts to manipulate the lawsuit in her favor. The courtroom was silent as the gravity of his testimony sank in, the evidence of her malice clear and undeniable. In the end, the judge dismissed Corinne's lawsuit, citing overwhelming evidence of her misconduct. The victory was more than legal. It was moral, a vindication of our fight for justice. But our celebration was short-lived. Within days of the lawsuit's dismissal, Corinne's house was put up for sale. Rumors swirled that she was leaving town, her reputation in ruins, and her power over the community shattered. The news of her departure was met with a mix of relief and reflection. The harm she had caused was deep, but so was the resilience she had unknowingly fostered among those she had sought to control. On the day of Corinne's departure, the community organized a gathering, not to celebrate her leaving, but to affirm the unity and strength we had discovered in ourselves. It was a moment of closure, a chance to look forward to a future free from her influence. As Nolan and I stood among our friends and neighbors, I realized the true extent of what we had achieved. We had not just exposed one woman's deceit. We had reclaimed our community, our sense of trust, and our hope for a better tomorrow. "Our fight was never just about Corinne," Nolan said, his voice filled with emotion as he addressed the gathering. "It was about all of us, about standing up for what's right and protecting each other. We've shown that, together, we can overcome even the darkest of manipulations." The applause that followed was not just for Nolan's words, but for the journey we had all undertaken. As I looked around at the faces in the crowd, I saw not just the end of Corinne's reign, but the beginning of something new and hopeful. In the end, Corinne's attempt to destroy us had only made us stronger. A testament to the power of unity and the indomitable spirit of a community that refused to be broken. Corinne's departure from the community marked a turning point, but not an end to our troubles. The peace we had fought so hard to achieve was fragile, and we soon learned that Corinne's influence reached further than we had imagined. A month had passed since the lawsuit was dismissed when the first signs of Corinne's retaliation emerged. It started subtly, a whisper campaign aimed at undermining the businesses of those who had stood against her. Then, more overtly, legal challenges began to surface against community projects we knew Corinne had once opposed. "It's her," Nolan said one evening, frustration evident in his voice as he looked over a series of legal notices that had been delivered to various community members. "She's behind this, I'm sure of it." The realization that Corinne was still orchestrating attacks from afar was a bitter pill to swallow. Our initial victory felt suddenly hollow, overshadowed by the ongoing battles we faced. But surrender was not in our nature. "We beat her once, we'll do it again," I declared, my resolve hardening. This was not just about defending our victories, but protecting the very fabric of our community. Our first step was to trace the legal challenges back to their source. With the help of Clara, who had become our unofficial investigator, we discovered a pattern. All the challenges were being funded through a web of shell companies, but the strategy bore the unmistakable hallmark of Corinne's manipulation. Armed with this information, we organized a community meeting, much like the one that had marked the beginning of our fight against Corinne. The turnout was massive, a testament to the solidarity that had grown among us. "We're facing a new kind of challenge," Nolan addressed the crowd, his voice steady and strong. "But we're not just a community, we're a family, and we protect our own." The meeting was a rallying point, a collective commitment to stand against Corinne's shadowy attempts to disrupt our lives. Legal defense funds were set up, and a network of support for affected businesses was established. We were more than just neighbors, we were allies in a shared struggle. But Corinne's retaliation took a more personal turn when rumors began to circulate about Nolan and me. Lies about our marriage, our finances, even our fitness as parents were spread, each more malicious than the last. It was an attack designed to isolate us, to erode the support we had worked so hard to build. But Corinne had underestimated the strength of the bonds within our community. Instead of turning away, our friends and neighbors rallied around us, offering their support and denouncing the rumors for what they were, baseless attempts to harm us. One evening, as we sat with a group of our closest allies, planning our next steps, Leah, Nolan's sister, spoke up. "She's trying to break us apart, but she's only making us stronger. We need to show her that her tactics won't work. Not here." Leah was right. Our response to Corinne's attacks needed to be more than just defensive. We needed to reclaim the narrative, to show that we were united in the face of her attempts to divide us. In the weeks that followed, we launched a series of community initiatives aimed at strengthening our bonds and supporting those who had been targeted by Corinne's actions. Fundraisers, community service projects, and public forums turned her attempts to sow discord into opportunities for unity and growth. As we worked to counteract Corinne's influence, I realized that this fight was not just about defeating an adversary. It was about affirming our values, about building a community where manipulation and deceit had no place. The battle was far from over, but with each step we took together, we were sending a clear message. We were stronger than Corinne's malice, and we would not be broken. The escalation of Corinne's attacks brought us to a crucial juncture. It was clear that simply defending against her maneuvers was not enough. We needed to take decisive action to end her influence once and for all. The challenge was formidable, but the stakes, our family's well-being, and the harmony of our community were too high to ignore. Nolan and I, alongside our closest allies, gathered one evening to strategize our next move. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of determination and the weight of the task ahead. "We need to find her Achilles' heel," Nolan said, breaking the silence. "There has to be something we can use to stop her for good." The room buzzed with suggestions, but it was Clara who brought the breakthrough. "What about the shell companies? If we can prove she's behind them, it could be enough to bring legal action against her." Her suggestion sparked a flurry of activity. We divided tasks, some of us digging deeper into the financial trails, while others reached out to legal experts to understand our options. The breakthrough came sooner than we expected. A mistake in the paperwork of one of the shell companies provided the link we needed to tie Corinne directly to the legal challenges being mounted against the community. With this evidence in hand, we approached the authorities. The process was painstaking, requiring every ounce of patience and resilience we had. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that we were on the verge of a significant victory. Then, the day we had been working towards arrived. The authorities confirmed that they had enough evidence to charge Corinne with financial misconduct and using her resources to maliciously target individuals and businesses. The news spread through the community like wildfire. For many, it was a moment of profound relief and vindication. For Nolan and me, it was a confirmation that our fight, though fraught with challenges, had been worth it. But our moment of triumph was tempered by the knowledge that the battle had taken its toll. We had seen firsthand the depths of Corinne's malice and the lengths she would go to maintain her control. It was a sobering reminder of the damage that one person's vendetta could inflict on so many lives. In the days that followed, As the legal proceedings against Corinne began to unfold, the community came together in a show of solidarity that was unlike anything we had experienced before. It was as if Corinne's downfall had not just removed a malignant force from our lives, but had also served as a catalyst for a newfound sense of unity and purpose. "We did it," Nolan said to me one evening as we sat on our porch watching the sunset. "It's finally over." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and elation. "We did," I agreed. "But we didn't do it alone. It was all of us, together." The battle against Corinne had tested us in ways we could never have anticipated. It had brought to light the darkest aspects of human nature, but had also illuminated the strength that could be found in community and collective action. As we looked towards the future, it was clear that our community would never be the same. We had been through the fire, but instead of being consumed by it, we had emerged stronger, more connected, and more committed to protecting the values that had united us in the face of adversity. Corinne's legacy, we decided, would not be one of fear and division, but a reminder of the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the unbreakable bond of a community that refuses to be broken.